to your life.
Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope everyone is having a beneficial and blessed Ramadan. I want to first and foremost thank you all for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. So today we have a unique opportunity to learn about how our singular words or expressions can have huge impacts on others. People throughout history have often found themselves in extraordinary events that would not have happened were it not for subtle words or actions from someone else. And so the title of our talk today is A Good Word by Sheikh Muhammad ElShinawy. Sheikh Muhammad ElShinawy is a graduate of English literature from Brooklyn College right here in New York City. He studied from the College of Hadith at the Islamic University of Medina, and he's currently completing his bachelor's in Islamic Studies at Mishkaf University. Sheikh Shinawi has translated works from the International Islamic Publishing House, the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, and Mishkaf University. And he's currently the religious director of the Islamic Education Center of Pennsylvania in Allentown, PA. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and I'll pass it off to the Sheikh.
Jazakallah khair, Uzair. Appreciate you, man. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah, and may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his family and his companions and all those who tread his path. May Allah grant us and you a life upon his path, and a death upon his religion, his guidance, and a reunion around him. Allahumma ameen. I hope everybody is well out there and benefiting from your Ramadan and enjoying your solitude or learning how to enjoy your solitude. May Allah Azza wa Jal help us realize the pricelessness in the little things that we are surrounded with within our homes and within our spaces, and not allow Corona to end except with a new version of ourselves having emerged from, I guess, the cocoon of the quarantine. Allahumma ameen. So I was asked, I think in light of a clip that's been circulating, published by Yaqeen Institute, to share some words on the same topic. And this clip, for those that haven't seen it, was basically trying to get people to adopt a better habit. And that is the habit of focusing on the good things and suggesting the good things and allowing the good to just organically purge the evil. Or just allowing a little bit of effort, going the extra mile to purge just the non-eventfulness or the apathy or just the status quo, right? Like the things we want to see changed in the world. And it spoke about the power of a good word. Sometimes you may not be able to get something done, but you can share a suggestion or offer some sort of validation, and someone else will get it done. And it'll be entirely thanks to you after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course. But Allah is allowing us opportunities to be part of these monumental events sometimes and to like rescue the ummah or restore the ummah. And you may not think so, like what can little me ever offer? Well, you may be in a tiny corner of the ummah in a tiny moment in time. You're a little wedge in the corner, yes, but that little wedge could make all the difference. To allow the ummah to get out of its rut, to allow the world to, have a new chapter, a brighter chapter, a refreshed chapter in its history. There are just so many times when things would have gone horribly wrong, and just a person just points, say, let's just try that, let's go this way, and just he lights a candle or lights a light bulb, as they say nowadays, for people. And after they head in that direction, they, metaphorically speaking, like they hear this huge crash behind them and they look back and they say, oh man, that could have been a disaster had we not gone that way. And likewise, sometimes a person may make a statement and die shortly thereafter, even if shortly means 20, 30, 40 years after. But 100, 200 years later, it comes to fruition. It evolves to be something magnificently useful for humanity. And so we really need to adopt this habit from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he's the one that taught the world this. He's the one that told us that do not belittle any act of good, even to see your brother with a cheerful face. He said even a good word is charity. You can be contributing a mega charity with a word sometimes, if the word is calculated, if the word is taken, the opportunity to say that word is taken advantage of, if the word is sincere. Absolutely, you can. And we mentioned like how Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, who's the number one reference point for us for that hadith, the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his 16-year mission of collecting Sahih al-Bukhari from all across the globe on foot, spent all of his money. He was very rich. He's a humongous project. It was because his sheikh, Ishaq ibn Rahoya, or Rahaway, it's pronounced two different ways, said if only someone were to have like the endurance and the determination to gather all of the most authentic reports about the Prophet ﷺ's practices throughout the day and the night. And likewise, someone like Imam al-Dhahabi, one of the greatest students ever of Ibn Taymiyyah and one of the greatest historians in the history of all of Islam, he said that one time his teacher said to him, "You have a good handwriting, or you have a handwriting that resembles the handwriting of a uh, of a hadith scholar." The hadith scholars had a certain handwriting. You know how doctors have a certain handwriting? Imagine saying to someone, "Hey, your handwriting looks like a doctor's handwriting." That could be an insult, though, nowadays, maybe, that it is scribbles on their, their scripts, their prescriptions. But in any case, he said to him, "You have the handwriting of the hadith scholars," and then he said, and it just cast inside me the love of hadith, and he became one of the greatest authorities and reference points in hadith, one of the most verifying scholars in hadith. And there's examples of this in the seerah and otherwise. But the owner of the seerah, the Prophet ﷺ himself, he's the one that turned everyone's attention to this. He pointed it out and he practiced it in just a great, great way. Something that we can develop within ourselves to be a source of khair beyond our lifetimes, really. There's a hadith I want to share with you to show you the contrast. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told us, an authentic report, he said the example of a believer, he's telling them the ideal believer is supposed to be like this. The example of the believer is like the example of the honeybee. He says, أكل طيبا, it only eats, consumes that which is like good and pure. ووضع طيبا, and only produces that which is good and pure. ووقعت, and when it lands, لم تكسر ولم تفسد, it doesn't break nor does it spoil. And he's describing, like just the beautiful nature and I guess lifestyle of the honeybee. The honeybee only eats that which is pure. It goes around looking for the nectar, doesn't it? And then it pulls the nectar from the best plant. It pulls the juice, the nectar. And then it gives back that which is even better for us, especially, which is the honey. It's so sweet in what it offers us. It's so beneficial, pollination otherwise, yeah, but the honey that it releases is so sweet. And it's so gentle. Honeybees are very agile and they're very gentle. Like they land very softly, very gracefully. And so they don't break the plant they land on. And so the Prophet ﷺ is telling you should be like that. You should only be taking from the world that which is blessed. And that has, of course, many applications, that which is good and pure and blessed in terms of like your income, the money income, but also your sources of information should also be pure, but also your observations. You should look to take that which is good, to catch that which is good, to scan and pick up that which is good, and then return it back to them even better. That is part of what this hadith is applying. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. He didn't just live like the ideal believer. He didn't just live like a blessed life, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He lived a life that was so graceful, right? He didn't break, and he brought the best out of others. And one of the ways he did that is this very concept, that he had this amazing skill, incredible skill, of catching people doing the right thing, right? Like observe and catching people doing the right thing and then amplifying it, making it better in them. We do the opposite. We catch people doing the wrong thing. Most people do that. I mean, it's just easy because we're so self-centered. And so like, if it's nice, so what? It's nice. But if it's bad, it's bothering me. So I got to point it out. Anyway, so that's not the personality of the honeybee. That's the personality of what? The fly. The fly looks for, you know what the fly looks for? Lands on garbage, lands on dung, right? Lands on number two, lands on things that are decaying and rotting, corpses. That's what flies land on. Bees land on the good stuff. So do you have the personality of the fly or do you have the personality of the bee? And so the Prophet ﷺ perfected this quality of finding the khair in people and amplifying it, pushing it forward. Like Bilal radiallahu anh, he went to him, the Prophet ﷺ went to him and said, "O Bilal, what is arja amalik? What's like the deed you bank on the most, the deed you have the most hope in, that'll benefit you with Allah, your most sincere deed? He says, Ya Rasulullah, the most hopeful deed I have is that every time I call to prayer, I wash for prayer, I make wudu, or every time I break my wudu, I make wudu and I pray for as long as Allah permits for me to pray, like until I'm forced to stop praying. I have a task to run, task to do. Is I would make wudu and continue praying, just open nafl they call it, right? Just continue praying these voluntary prayers. And so the Prophet ﷺ told him, what is the most hopeful deed? Because I heard your footsteps or your feet rustling in front of me in paradise. That's huge, right? That doesn't mean obviously that Bilal is ahead of or superior to the Prophet ﷺ. The scholar said it either means that the same way he served the Prophet ﷺ in this world, Allah will have him ahead of him in Jannah to serve him the same way, like a servant would roll out a red carpet. Or other scholars, they said that no, the same way Bilal was ahead of the Prophet ﷺ to the masjid because he was the mu'adhin. He would call to the adhan for the Prophet to come and the Muslims to come pray. Likewise, he was made to see, it was revealed to him an image where Bilal is ahead of him in Jannah, a matching scene basically. And so he pointed that out to him so that he would be even more consistent in it, even be more dedicated to it. And it's not just Bilal, he would do this all the time, alayhi salatu wasalam. That, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, one time told him, I think they were on a journey and, everyone stops basically and they set up their tent or they just pray next to their camel or they sleep next to their camel. And so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he said to him, "O Abu Musa, if you would have only seen me last night as I was standing there, I couldn't move, like I was just hypnotized by the beauty of your voice." He said, "I was just standing there listening to your recitation as you recited last night." And he said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, if I knew you were standing there, I would have done more. Like I would have recited more and even more beautifully," which is not showing off, obviously. That would be haram. He means, and it's allowed for you to beautify your voice if your intention is locked in place, that it's to help people enjoy the Quran more, reflect on the Quran more. That's what he's saying. But the point is, he caught him and made it a point the next morning to not forget to mention that back to him, so that they can amplify the good in them. You can amplify or sometimes even activate the good in people that can go for a lifetime. Like one good brother in the da'wah, he says, man, one of my greatest thrills is to think about what my students will produce after I'm gone. That's a beautiful thing to cling to think about. The strengths of my students that I didn't have, the opportunities of my students that I didn't have, the building of my students on where I couldn't take them beyond. That was they started, and then they had a lifetime of their own to build on. That could be yours. That could be in your scale on the day of judgment, sometimes with just a word. And so magnify people's good. Don't be selfish with your praise. Don't be that person that's like a fly who magnifies people's faults. And that's the other part of this discussion that we want to, I guess, spend a little bit of time on. Some people, lots of people, all they see are faults, right? And when you're fixated on seeing the faults of people, it's very easy to know. Just check how people feel about you. You should be concerned about how Allah's creation feels about you. Like, by and large, are you like someone that conversations, people always like watch their words with you? And, that's the sign of, I don't want to say, but they say that's the sign of, someone who is like a certified jerk, if you will, right? Like someone who's just really not nice. He's an expert at shooing away and chasing away all of his friends, because people just need to just walk on eggshells around them, and people are always being criticized. Just, people don't like to be criticized, even if it's true. So like when you do want to criticize someone, you want to do it like sparingly, and in a very wise way. Like ignore some of it, and then when you do address the other some, do it in a very, very careful way with the people that would be receptive to it and wouldn't chase them away. But with praise, people like praise even if it's not true, right? They like flattery. That's actually why the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is important hadith actually for this conversation. He said, throw dust or dirt into the faces of the praisers. He doesn't mean like don't praise people. He praised people all the time, right? He said the most merciful of my ummah is Abu Bakr, and the strongest of them is Umar, and the one with the most haya, shameful, like modesty, is Uthman, and the most knowledgeable of halal and haram is. He praised all the time, all the time. Uh, but what that hadith means is be careful that people like being praised so much. Don't lie to them. You don't want to lie to someone, and don't delude them. Like, don't be excessive. That's what he meant by don't overly praise. But praising in general, can you imagine what this ummah looks like if we're not encouraging each other and not praising each other? Kind of like what it looks like now. You know, one of my shuyukh, he said, whomever fights success deserves failure. Like when someone is successful, we want, like we need so much of it, right? In like you, many of you are probably, you know, attendees at your neighbor nets or part of the core team at your neighbor nets, and even if your neighbor net becomes 10 times its size, or the neighboring neighbor net becomes 100 times its size, what have we covered? We've covered nothing. This is a small group of some of the people that attend the masjid, and 80% of the Muslims roughly don't attend the masjid, not even for Jumu'ah, right? And so, like, do you want to help people or not? You shouldn't be upset that another doctor helped more patients than you. There's more, that's Allah's grace, and there's more than enough patients to go around, oh doctor. Unless you're in it for you, you're not in it for the patients. And so we need to promote success, and we need to promote people's strengths so that their weaknesses can continue to weaken, if you will. Their weaknesses can continue to diminish. Because if you're focused on faults, you know what you're going to do? You're going to fall into a bunch of things. Number one, you're going to start seeing faults that aren't even there. You're going to start imagining something's wrong when it's not there. You're going to fall into a great deal of like oppressive behavior to others, great deal of injustice. That's the first thing. And people do that, right? Even like your interpretation of events, it wasn't so malicious, it wasn't so sinister, but you saw it that way. You chose to see it that way because you were so blinded, you know, by your lens, your dark lens, the lens of the fly, not the lens of the bee. You know, in the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, when he couldn't find the bird, he said, "Where's the bird? The scouting bird." He said, "What is wrong with me that I don't see the bird, or is it absent?" So he said, "It's possible it's a problem with my observation. I'm not seeing the bird. Is it not here? Am I not seeing it, or is it not here?" That's what he's saying. That's very humble of a king, right? To be like that, to give him the benefit of the doubt. You know, subhanAllah, just in the same story, because we were covering it yesterday with my masjid, 2 ayat later, or earlier, with the ant said the same thing. The ant said, "Sulaiman, you guys, ants, get underground." This, subhanAllah, is not a story. It's not like entertainment. This is so profound. Ants, get underground quickly so that the armies of Sulaiman do not trample you, وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, while they don't realize it. He even gave them in a time of panic the benefit of the doubt, like quickly so they don't kill us while not realizing it. Meaning if they do kill us, it was by accident. Look at the intelligence of the ant. Many of us don't have this intelligence where all we think about is the faulty interpretation. And so if you're focused on wrong, focused on faults, you will see faults, imaginary faults, faults where they aren't even there. And that's not just a sign of bad manners. Again, that's a sign of bad intelligence. You weren't intelligent enough to see it any other way. You know, interestingly, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, I always remember this because I always think it was a little bit too much from my stupidity. Good thing you guys aren't recording. Yes, I know they're recording. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, one time they came to him and said, "So and so, we can smell clearly there's alcohol on his beard, dripping from his beard." And so Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, "Nuhina an tajassus." We were forbidden in Islam from spying on people. When I first heard that, like, that's what I mean. I was being unintelligent. When I was like, "Come on, man! Like, what do you mean? Like, it's just a little bit too much. Like, are we sure this narration is like authentic? This report? Like, what do you mean? It doesn't get much clearer than that." And then someone brought to my attention the interpretation of this athar, this report from the Sahaba. Ibn Mas'ud could have meant a bunch of things. Maybe the guy who was sick and he threw up, because when you throw up, it does smell like that same, the fermentation, like from the acids in your stomach. It smells a little bit like alcohol, uh, or a lot sometimes like alcohol if you've ever smelled the two substances. Or maybe here's another one. Maybe some guy was drinking alcohol and he told him, "Ittaqillah, fear Allah," and so the guy spit in his face, and so he has alcohol dripping from his beard. There's so many, other interpretations if you would just be open to them. Anyway, so if you want to find faults, you're going to find faults that don't even exist. Okay. The second problem is if you're looking for faults, I got to wrap up now. But if you're looking for faults, here's something else you're going to do. You're going to find an actual fault and then reduce that whole person to their fault. And I want to tell you, like I said, we want to focus more on the good so that it can flush out the evil in people, right? But when you do have to address an evil, let it be less on lesser occasions, but address the evil action. Don't reduce the person to evil. When you speak to people, the part of a good word is for you to be very conservative with your criticism to the criticized action. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us this. This is a very important tip: raising your kids, doing your da'wah, speaking to people. When Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu, he was spited and he hurled a racial slur basically at a person, said son of a black woman to the end of it. Some narrations say it was Bilal. The narration in Bukhari just says he called him son of a black woman. And so the Prophet ﷺ said what? He didn't say you're disgusting, Abu Dharr. He said what? إِنَّكَ مْرُؤٌ فِيكَ جَاهِلِيَّةٌ. You are a person in whom is an aspect of that pre-Islamic ignorant culture, that ignorance. In you, not you, in you. That is very beautiful. That is part of a good word, by the way. Similarly, similarly, what? Aisha radiallahu anha, when she kind of slighted Safiya, it was backbiting, because backbiting is not just by words. But she withheld her words, but she gestured with her hand. So she said, بحسب صفية أنها هكذا. She said, it's enough that Safiya's, she means she's short. She gestured as to her short height. And so the Prophet ﷺ said what? لقد قلت كلمة لو مزجت بماء البحر لمزجت. You said a statement just now that if it were mixed with the water of the oceans, it would have spoiled them all. See how vast the ocean is? That statement is so toxic, it would have spoiled the entire ocean. But look what he said, the statement, right? The statement. And then now look at all the other narrations of how much he praised Abu Dharr and how much he praised Aisha. He didn't reduce them to their fault. And the third problem is when you focus on faults, and this will be the last point I give you. So the idea is always find a good word to say. Don't hold back your suggestions. Don't hold back your praise, and beware of being a fly, being like the one that lands on no good, on dung. The third problem with focusing on faults is that when you focus on faults, you will actually amplify them, because people in general, are a reflection of how society sees them, right? If no matter how hard I try, you're gonna tell me that I'm not gonna be good in academics, and my only route out of whatever the ghetto is sports, I'll just believe that, right? There are many people that believe that. Malcolm X, rahimahullah, he spoke a lot about how people have self-hate, how you guys got people to tell you that your nose is wrong and your lips are wrong and your hair is nappy, and this is because society was drilling it at them, and so they internalized that concept, right? Likewise, we can do this to people if we don't give them room to grow, room to reform. By the way, this could be of the reasons why when someone fornicates in Islam, of what the Prophet ﷺ prescribed is like banishment, to distance them from the place where they committed fornication. It could be because people aren't, of the reasons for sure, so you can forget the sin and forget your lover, if you will, your partner, and so that distant from the eye, distant from the heart. It's a reality. But also of the wisdoms could be that people aren't as forgiving as Allah, and so they'll keep reminding you about your sin. But when you've, left their face for a long time and come back, like, it's more likely that they'll accept you as a new you. It's been so long, only Allah knows what's happened in the past year. It's so helpful, uh, because people are a reflection of how society perceives them. You know that beautiful hadith, and I'll close with it. I'm sorry. The hadith of Zahir radiallahu anh, is in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, and others have narrated it, of course, where there used to be a man named Zahir that lived. There was a Bedouin man. He just lived in the deserts. He didn't live in the city. And so whenever he'd come to the city of Medina, he would bring the Prophet ﷺ like souvenirs that don't exist in the city, like a special kind of cheese they make, or like, I don't know, a special kind of whatever it may be, like when you go to the village and you say, oh, I want that meal that only is cooked there. He would bring little things from the desert to Medina, and the Prophet ﷺ would always pack for him his bags with things from Medina for him to take back to his dwellings in the desert. And so he would say, Zahirun badiyatuna wa nahnu hadiru. He is our desert and we are his city, meaning he's our access point to the desert, and we are his access point to the city life. And so one time the Prophet ﷺ saw him selling his goods in the market. He came into town, and so he grabbed him from behind, and he's like, Arsilni, let go, let go, let go. Then he turned around and he realized, oh man, this is the Prophet ﷺ. And so he leaned back. It's a very beautiful hadith. He leaned back so that his back would become flush with the chest of the Prophet ﷺ. Lucky him, he got to touch him. Alayhi salatu wassalam. May Allah reunite us with our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so he would lean back and just let it happen. And so the Prophet ﷺ went further now that he was reassured. This is not a prank, by the way, because he already knew at that point in the hadith. Some people misuse this hadith, by the way. Pranks are bad. Scaring people gets you sin. If you upload the video, as many people watch it, as many times you've promoted that sin. I just want to make that clear. Because you know why, because. So after he realized with the Prophet ﷺ and he got comfortable, then the Prophet ﷺ knew he wouldn't be scared by this joke. And so he said, Man yashtari hadha al-abd, who will purchase this slave? The Prophet ﷺ abolished this practice that used to exist in Arabia, where people would kidnap people and sell them as slaves. Easy money, So he said, who would purchase this slave? And so Zahir responded back to him and said, Idan tajiduni kasidan. Ya Rasulullah, you'll find me worthless. You're not making any money off of me. No one likes me. No one values me. I'm just some dude from the desert. I'm a nobody. You would find me valueless. So he said to him, وَلَكِنَّكَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ لَسْتَ بِكَاسِدٍ. But you are certainly in the eyes of Allah not valueless. But in some narrations, بَلْ أَنْتَ غَالٍ, you are very valuable in the eyes of God. And so to instill in people that they are valuable with Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has love for them, that Allah keeps giving them chances, that Allah Azza wa Jal has given them a certain strength that other people don't have. We are so much more in need, brothers and sisters. And there's actually a whole article on Muslim Matters that I penned a few years ago about this concept. We are so much more in need of promoting the good that is absent from this ummah or weak in this ummah than we are in need of destroying, deconstructing, bashing the evil that's in this ummah. That is on the family level, on the individual level, even, subhanAllah, I'm out of time, but even on yourself. If you find certain weaknesses in yourself that you can't get past right now, develop certain strengths to a point where they can push those evils out of your life. Easiest example, start praying before you want to just manhandle all of these vices in your life and get rid of them. This helps a huge deal. Build the khair. You need to do that proportionately within yourself and with others more than you destroy the evil. Barakallahu lakum, guys. Jazakallahu khairan. If there are any questions, we can take them now if the moderators want to hand them over or share them. Otherwise, we'll call it an afternoon.
Jazakallah, Sheikh, for the beautiful and beneficial talk. There are a few questions. The first one, it's a two-part question. So the question goes, as Muslims, are we allowed to expect praise for the good that we do? And then the second part of this is, how do we avoid amplifying our own pride when we are being praised without showing false humility?
Okay. So the first question was what? Again?
As Muslims, are we even allowed to expect praise for the good that we do?
No, we shouldn't expect praise in the sense that expect because we deserve. Like we expect, like I expect praise all the time, and it's part of what keeps me vigilant. Like, by the way, they're gonna say this, but don't let their assumptions about you, you know, overturn your certainty about yourself. That sort of stuff, right? Like, don't forget your flaws. Don't forget, you know. So expecting it could be smart, but expecting it like you deserve it, no, absolutely not. This is and that I guess bleeds into the second question, that we must know our strengths. I mean, you have to know your strengths, because like, how do you even say that I can't answer a question without knowledge? I have to know that I know it, right? And so you have to know your strengths from your weaknesses, but that doesn't mean you feel inherently strong, inherently capable, inherently superior. That is the issue. You see your strength and you continue to attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, and thank him for it, and know that it could be pulled from you in any instant, and it could be your downfall. Your strength could be your downfall. That's the story of shaitan, right? And so expecting praise, no, you're not supposed to do that. No, liking praise is natural. Why do people say, like, if you like praise, you'll never be sincere and stuff? That is not like to be understood in the absolute sense. But to like it so much that you seek it as your primary gain for your actions, yes, that's when it's anti-sincerity. But to like praise, this is only natural. I mean, the Quran says that the Prophet ﷺ was hurt by the insults. And so we are hurt by insults, and we are, you know, pleased with good manners, with kindness, with praise, with appreciation. That's natural. But to become a servant of that, to be primarily driven by that, is to mean that you are not in that respect, at least not a servant of Allah. You are a servant of yourself and your self promotion. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And an additional question that we had was, how can we see the good in people who we do not have a strong opinion of, or people that we dislike?
Okay. It's going to depend on who those people are, but there's certain things uh, that would help you. Number one, see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put them in your life to test you with them. That's the first thing, right? وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. We made you tests for one another to see whether you will persevere in behaving the right way, and your Lord is watchful. He's seeing how you're going to interact based on these factors, individuals that He's placed in your life. The second thing is for you to make Allah the gauge of people and not you. So how does Allah see this person? If Allah, for example, has given them Iman, has given them Islam, you know, as one of the scholars says, how do you not accept as your brother or your sister, obviously, right? But how do you not accept as your brother someone who Allah has accepted as his servant? Like in that case, your problem is not with that person. Your problem is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And so like remove yourself from the middle of the equation, as close as they are to me, as appeasing as they are to me. That's how much we love them. No, Iman means to make Allah the center of your life. That's what the faithful does. The closer someone is to Allah, the closer they are to me. So the closest of them to Allah is the Prophet ﷺ and the other prophets after him. And so they are the closest to me. And then the righteous after them, and so on and so forth. But again, now, if Allah has given someone Iman, they are deserving of a certain degree of acceptance from us and love, even if you don't like them. Like, is that a contradiction? No. Like, I love them because I seek Allah's love, and I love Allah, and so I'm going to love those whom Allah has chosen for this faith, right? Even if I don't like them, meaning I'm not naturally inclined with them, I don't want to spend time with them, it's difficult on me to have a conversation with them. Those things are fine. We can talk about those in more detail a little later. You give them the bare minimums of what a Muslim gets, and that's it. But even a non-Muslim, by the way, this is at the end of the day the creation of Allah. That is why Allah forbid injustice, for example, now dhulm against everyone, right? Because they are the creation of God. And so how can you assume to be close to God when you violate his servants? That's it. And being well-wishing for people in general is an exercise that we all need to practice and get better at, because that's what our deen boils down to being well-wishing for everyone, even Fir'aun, before he died at least. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. And I'll check the last one that we have on our end. Is it okay to talk about someone who you dislike to a close Muslim brother and tell them to stay away from that individual? And the person that you dislike is someone that keeps you away from Islam when you're with them. So essentially warning someone of someone else.
Yes, the same way that we like certain people for the sake of Allah, because we assume they're close to Allah, or we love them so that we can get closer to Allah, we can have dislike for people, right? We hate people for Allah, not for who they are. They are the creation of Allah, but because of certain actions or certain convictions they have that are hateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they're hateful to us as well. That's with regards to feelings. We're still not going to violate them. We're still not going to infringe on the rights Allah gave them, whatever those rights may be, depending on the person and the creature, not just people. And then speaking about them, if they're a Muslim, they have an extra layer of inviolability, that even their reputations, right? We can't speak about them in a negative light unless there's no way around it. No way around it meaning what? There's an outweighing benefit in speaking about them in order to gain that benefit and, I guess, avert that harm. So I'm stuck sometimes between, like, as an imam, for example, a person that I know in the community that I like a lot and I really wish well for and all of that, and I have to safeguard their honor, their reputation, but then someone else, I have now a conflicting obligation, competing values, if you will. A guy who's telling me that person A has come for my daughter, I'm going to have to tell him, listen, I know for a fact I've been trying to get him a job for a long time. He doesn't hold a job for 6 months, type thing. I have no choice. I cannot say, by the way, you know, just be careful because people nowadays, you know, they're not good with employment. I have to be honest with him, right? I'm not allowed to tell this person anything else that is unrelated, you know, just what he needs to know to not be harmed. I have to tell him. And if you don't know how to apply this rule, then just ask your local scholar, your local sheikh, your local imam, if it pertains to you or not. Because we can, of course, you know, like, just silence our conscience and say, yeah, it probably pertains to me for the greater good. I'm going to talk and bash this person. Be careful of that. If you're not sure that you must mention it to help that person or help the people around him be safe from him, then consult before you step into that dangerous territory, because it's not a light matter, and Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
Good save, Daniel.
Assalamu alaikum. Everything's
Thank
going
you.
well. Yeah, Uzair's having a little bit of a audio issue, so I'll just go ahead and take over, inshallah. But that wraps up our Q&A as well. So Jazakallah khair so much, Sheikh. We really appreciate it. If anyone wants to hear a little bit more on this as well, there's actually one of the videos on Yaqeen Institute's website from the Sheikh, where we were kind of inspired to have this session in discussion of the power of a good word. So inshallah, if you guys have the time, please go ahead and check that out. Just before we wrap up, inshallah, I was asked as well to quickly speak about a little bit about our organization, one that is really trying to embody everything that the Sheikh was saying, in the sense of the power of a good word. And of course, I'm talking about Young Muslims, which is an organization that many of you go to. And for those who are on who don't have as much knowledge about it, it's essentially a group that is striving to continue the legacy of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where he came centuries ago to bring about a way of life, a deen, a different way of going about life the right way, under the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And something that we learn through our time in YM is that nothing can change a person's life like the power of a good word or a power of a good action. And we've seen it time and time again, and we really strive to accomplish this, especially when we're dealing with youth who, when they first come to Young Muslims, not everyone's on the same plane. Some people might be the ones who are hafiz, some people might be the ones who've never opened a Quran in their lives. And we take them in all the same. And we look at it as this is the place where you can have the varsity captain with the one who's only there to read books and is the smartest kid in class, the one who's the most popular, to the one who's so unable to speak because they don't want others to hear what they have to say. And they come into this banner, they come into this group, and the only thing that matters at the end of the day, you can have your differences, you can have your own different types of things that you do when you go home, but when you're here, when you're in Young Muslims, we're here to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. And that's something we try to do in our halaqas, that's something we try to do even in our activities afterwards. Everything that we do is for the purpose of serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. And never have I seen that become more apparent than this current circumstances in the quarantine that we've had. When many have shut down and many are struggling to find out the next step, SubhanAllah, I have to say, it has not been easy, but I've really been proud of all the work that Young Muslims has done to continue our effort and bringing the continuing of the Prophet's legacy, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, onto the online space, where you have online halaqas, online games, online things, just to bring the youth together. Where we cannot meet physically, our hearts are as united as ever under pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it really comes back to the mentorship aspect of it, right? And that's something that I think is really what sets Young Muslims apart, as seeing someone, being a group that is by the youth and for the youth. And I keep thinking, as the Sheikh was talking about some of the instances, and even watching his video about these different things that change the world, these different instances, these moments, these little things that may have been a small investment on one individual's part, but it changed the other individual for the rest of their lives. And I think about my time in Young Muslims, being someone who's been around for 8 or 9 years, alhamdulillah. And when I first came in, I just remember the older brothers who looked after me, the ones who trusted me, the ones who challenged me, the ones who made me think and force myself to be a better person than I was yesterday. The ones who reminded me, don't speed on the road. The ones who reminded me, make sure you pray salah right before we go play basketball. Make sure you do all these things. And subhanAllah, I just think about all the different instances that we have. And this is the place where when you're young and you're 15 years old and you didn't get your allowance that week and you don't have money for food, but you're too embarrassed to say something, because that's when your older brother or your older sister comes in and they tell you, they see it on your face. That's all they see. And they pay for your food. And how do you repay someone like that? How do you repay someone who's done that for you? And the solution that I found in my time in YM is we don't pay them back for their meal the next week. That's not the best way to give it back. But rather, the best way to give it back is to not necessarily give it back at all, because they gave that to you for Allah's sake only. And what we need to do is that when and the shoe goes on the other foot, and subhanAllah, in this organization, it's so amazing how that happens, where we go from being the one who has being mentored by someone 3 or 4 years older than you to just in the span of a couple of years, now you're in their shoes. And now you see that 15-year-old who didn't get to pay for their food. And you remember what you look like, so you know this is exactly what's happening, and you pay it for them. And that's what YM is trying to do, is pay it forward. And pay whatever was given to us and pay it forward. And that is how we will pay back the legacy and what was done by the predecessors before us. And the Prophet ﷺ first and foremost, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes you really think, like, this organization, alhamdulillah, has been around for nearly 30 years. And the founding members had all this vision about, we were going to have a national organization that's going to, have this national structure with these sub-regions and all these different things. But they knew, just as the Prophet ﷺ knew, they would not be the ones to carry that out necessarily. So what did they do? They focused on working on other people. They made sure that the legacy continued even after their time was done. And subhanAllah, all the growth that we've had, and now we have halaqas from Boston to California and so many areas in between. And it's all because of the efforts of these people who came before us, who invested in us, brothers and sisters, to continue this great work for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and continue the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. And so I ask, before we wrap up, inshallah, for those who go to Young Muslims, do not ever underestimate the power of your actions, the power of a good word. That little bit of investment that you make can change that person's life. Because these will be the people in young Muslims right now. These will be the people who are your future sheikhs. These will be the people who are your future da'is, the future relief workers, the future masjid board members, the future psychiatrists, the future psychologists, the future professionals who will help other professionals. And that is what we are aiming for here. And that is what you see, the humble beginnings right now for all these different people. And for those who are parents, those who are supporters, those who see the work that Young Muslims is doing, I ask you that, are we doing enough to invest? Are we doing enough to help these young stars who are in their humble beginnings, they're stars in the making? Are we doing enough to make them successful? And be that brotherhood and sisterhood that unites the ummah like it's not united right now. And have this common goal that we all want to get to, which is please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost. And so I ask you to please, inshallah, donate, and please give the power of a good word and a small investment on your part. Because that small investment is something even the Prophet ﷺ understood, that he knew that his life would not be long enough to continue this amazing deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, presenting this deen. And so he invested in the youth. He invested in Osama ibn Zayd when he asked him to, or commanded him to lead the army, even at such a young age. He invested in Mus'ab ibn Umair to be the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Medina to preach the message. He invested in Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, not just to marry her, but to help make her one of the most knowledgeable people ever, man or woman. And so I ask you that if you would take the time and give to this organization so that we can continue this great work and we can continue and become from our humble beginnings into the game changers of this ummah and the game changers of this society. Because we often think about, is my son or is my daughter going to get a job? Are they going to get married? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to have the right things? But what we really need to be also thinking about first and foremost, is my child going to still be on the deen? Is my child going to pray when I'm no longer around to tell them to pray? And subhanAllah, it's crazy to think, but even something as simple as meeting up every week and playing basketball and having a short talk has changed so many lives. And so I want to wrap up with that, inshallah, that if you can give as little as whatever it is, $10, $20, whatever it might be, you will be investing in the future. You will be investing in the game changers who will change this ummah for the better, inshallah, and bring it even closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we go on the last day and we are asked, we can go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we can tell him we did invest with our words, with our actions for the future of the Muslim ummah. So Jazakallah khair. The link, inshallah, will be on the chat if you guys want to go ahead and donate, inshallah. Uzair, I'm not sure if, I don't think his audio is working still. But Jazakallah khair. We really appreciate Yaqeen Institute in particular for allowing us to partner with them on this. And Sheikh ElShinawy, of course, for dedicating so much time for us. And we really appreciate it. We hope to see you again soon, inshallah, hopefully in person. But Jazakallah khair. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up with that. Sheikh, if you would like to give a closing dua, maybe we can wrap up with that, inshallah.
Certainly. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal in this blessed day of Ramadan to portion for us a fear of Him that would come between us and disobeying Him, and grant us acts of obedience that would deliver us to His paradise, and grant us the conviction that would make light for us, that would lighten for us the calamities of this world, and to allow us to enjoy our hearing and our sight and our strength until our last day, and to only allow our vengeance to be against those who wronged us, and to not make this world the extent of our knowledge or the extent of our concern, and to not empower against us those that would not have mercy on us. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, shadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakallahu khairan, everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.